Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Retaining and enriching the human capital for rebuilding the nation. Now, that is the topic of our expert panel discussion today. Now, with the current trend of so-called brain drain happening right now, this topic has garnered a significant attention nationwide and has become a focal point of discussion among many. As a result, the Centre for Banking Studies of Central Bank of Sri Lanka has taken the initiative to contribute to this discussion by gathering diverse perspectives onto Unified platform, allowing us to explore various aspects of the current situation. Now, having said that, let me have the pleasure of welcoming all of you who are joining with our expert panel discussion today from all over the country via Zoom and Facebook. So, for delivering the keynote address of this expert panel discussion, we have invited Dr. Bilesha Veeraratne, Research Fellow and Head of Migration and Urbanization Research at the Institute of Policy Studies. We warmly welcome you, madam. And subsequent to Dr. Veeraratne's keynote address, we will commence our discussion with the participation of our esteemed panelists. So today, the panel consists of Professor H.D. Karunaratne, Vice Chancellor of University of Colombo, and Mr. Jonathan Allis, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Hatton National Bank PLC, and Mr. Ashik Kemali, Director, Italians, and past Chair of SLASCOM. And this panel discussion will be moderated by Ms. Hiroshi Pereira, Head of Applied Research of Frontier Research. So we warmly welcome all of you with great honor. Now, as I mentioned earlier, today we have a good viewership joining with us virtually. So our viewers can interact with the session and direct their questions to the panel in two ways. The first is by the Q&A option in Zoom, and second is as a comment on the Facebook live stream. So depending on time, we will try to accommodate as much as questions possible. So now, without taking much time, let's commence the session. And to begin with, let me introduce our keynote speaker today, Dr. Bilesha Veeraratne. Dr. Bilesha Veeraratne is a research fellow and head of migration and urbanization policy research at the Institute of Policy Studies, IPS, Sri Lanka. And previously, Dr. Veeraratne was a postdoctoral research associate at the Princeton University in New Jersey, USA. Dr. Veeraratne has been a consultant to international organizations such as International Organization Migration and International Labour Organization, the World Bank, the Asian Development Bank. She works closely with the Ministry of Labour and Foreign Employment in Sri Lanka and Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment, and has served in several committees such as the Expert Committee to formulate National Policy and Action Plan on Migration for Employment to Sri Lanka 2023-2027, and the Expert Committee to formulate a Social Security Scheme for Migrant Workers, the Task Force to draft procedures for regularization of recruitment intermediaries for foreign employment industry, and the National Advisory Committee on Labour Migration. Dr. Veeraratne has published widely in international journals and publications. She holds a BA in Economics from the University of Colombo, Sri Lanka, and MA in Economics from Rutgers University, USA, and an MPhil and PhD in Economics from the City University of New York, USA. So with that rich introduction, let me have the pleasure of inviting Dr. Bilesha Veeraratne to commence the keynote today. Over to you, madam.
Thank you very much, Kushan, for that very generous introduction. Thank you to the Center for Banking Studies of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka and Dr. Timothy Samaratunga for inviting me today. I feel very honored. Thank you so much. So let me share my screen now. Kushan, can you all see my screen in full screen mode?
Yes, madam, very well.
All right. Thank you very much. So we're going to talk about retaining and enriching human capital for rebuilding the nation. So before we talk about retaining and enriching, I think we need to talk about why we need to do that. That is because all of us know we've been hemorrhaging talent or skills or human capital from Sri Lanka as of recently with this economic crisis going on. So there are various forms of brain drain that's going on in the country right now, and it takes place in various forms. So one of the most common that we've noticed is the departure of workers or people leaving Sri Lanka, high-skilled people leaving Sri Lanka to take up foreign jobs. And then there are less obvious streams of brain drain going on as well. One is tide migration, where when a high-skilled or a professional leaves the country, most often his family will also be going along with him as tide migrants. And this might include a very high-skilled professional spouse, because most of the time there is associative mating, and then the high-skilled people would have married similar qualified people, and then their high potential offsprings are also likely to depart with them. And then in addition to this tide migration stream, we also see a significant outflow of students going from Sri Lanka. Now, these students are often qualified up to A levels and high potential, and this is like the cream of Sri Lanka that we are losing with this brain drain stream. So if we look at the data situation, we have proper data only for very small segment or one segment of brain drain that's happening in Sri Lanka. That is for professionals leaving through registration with the Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment. Now, this is one segment, because not all migrants would register with the Sri Lanka Bureau of Foreign Employment, even though they are required to. Many migrate outside the purview of SLBFE. Now, for professionals, there is more tendency for them to migrate out of the purview of SLBFE. Why? Because they have their own connections, they have their own networks, and they would have found the job on their own, not through a recruitment agent, and they have their social connections to help them establish themselves in the country of destination. So they have good insurance and social security packages in their jobs. So the protection that is given by the SLBFE registration is not adding much to a professional worker, so they are less likely to register with the Bureau. So because of that, we might be losing a large chunk of professionals leaving foreign employment when we look at the SLBFE data. And then also we have near zero data on student migration. And also it's very hard to know about tide migrants in terms of their professions or whether how they're contributing to brain drain. So let's look at some of the overall trends, not only professional or brain drain, but let's look at the overall trends, because we've been hearing a lot of rhetoric recently about a lot of people leaving Sri Lanka, everybody's leaving Sri Lanka, whether this is true or not, whether it shows up in the data. So the first figure I want to show you is the monthly departures of registered migrant workers. These are total migrant departures. So now we heard that a lot of people are leaving, and yes, true, we see that in data. Before the pandemic, we saw about less than 20,000 departures taking place a month. But after the pandemic, around mid-2021, it started going up, and now it is well established over about 20,000 departures a month. So compared to about 211,000 departures in 2019 in total, in 2022, we had over 300,000 all total migrants leaving Sri Lanka, migrant workers. So what we've been hearing about migrant worker departures is true. It is justified in SLBFE data. And then another rhetoric that we heard was everybody's trying to go and everybody's flocking at the passport office to get a new passport, and they're all leaving. Do we see this in data? Yes, there is a massive increase in passport issuance as of January 2022. It has skyrocketed significantly. Now, this passport issuance has a capacity to capture people outside the SLBFE also. So we see some component of the line being above the SLBFE departure line. Then if we look at the total departures of Sri Lankans provided by the Department of Immigration and Immigration, we should get an understanding about how far Sri Lankans are really leaving right now, whether it has really gone up so much as we talk about. So let's look at that. This dark orange line is that of the all departures of Sri Lankan passport holders. So now this will also include migrant workers going depicted by the SLBFE, and also any Sri Lankan who's going out of Sri Lanka. Maybe he had gone once or twice within a given year, that is also recorded. Any Sri Lankan permanent residents outside of the country coming to visit Sri Lanka and leave Sri Lanka, that is also recorded. But what I want to show and say is that when you look at this number, we don't see anything very different from what we saw from the pre-pandemic levels, right? We see a good upward trend since mid-2021, where it has gone up significantly, but still we are around the same amount of total departures that we saw before the pandemic. So what we heard that everybody's leaving the country is not really reflected in the Department of Immigration and Immigration data yet. But then these are aggregate numbers. So let's look at some disaggregated composition type of information. So when we look at the skills categorization of departures, I wanted to look at 2019 before the pandemic and then 2020 and 2023. So here we see that the share of professional departures has been hovering around 4.5% to 5% in all 3 years that I'm showing. So I'm showing these 3 years and not showing 2020 and 2021. Why? Because those years had a small base of total migration. So in these pie charts, we don't see a difference. So let's go to the absolute values and let's look at what's going on there. Now in 2020 and 2021, if you can see my cursor, we had a low level of total departures, 53,000 in 2020 and about 122,000 in 2021. With such departures, we saw an increase in the percentage of professional departures. In 2021, specifically, we saw a near 7% compared to the previously around 5% departures. But again, in 2022, it came down to about 4% of the total departures. Now, in terms of the relative share, professionals is not so significant right now, as per what we see in the SLBFE data. But when we look at the absolute figure, I think it is concerning. Earlier, when we had about 8,000 professionals leaving, now it has almost doubled to reach about over 14,000 professionals leaving. So that is a concern. Earlier, we had 8,000 plus or 9,000 professionals leaving, and now we have 14,000 professionals leaving. And when we look at some of the destinations where they are going, we see that it is not typically always the total departure destinations that we have traditionally have. Traditionally, a lot of Sri Lankans do go to the Middle East. We see with professionals also, Qatar is the top destination, followed by UAE. But then if you look over here, Kuwait was the top destination for total migration. But in terms of professionals, it ranks very low. But Japan, on the other hand, which was relatively low in terms of total departures, has a significant number of professionals departing to Japan. So there are differences when we look at the disaggregated data. And sorry, I think I skipped one. Yes. When we look at who they are, we see that there is a large component of male professionals rather than female professionals. And then within the age groups, consistent to the total departures, we see that professionals are also in the prime working age groups. So now this was the SLBFE story. Migration has migrants beyond SLBFE registered migrants. So SLBFE data does not depict a full picture. So what about the professionals going outside SLBFE registration? We can expect that at least the same or a more intense departure pattern would be experienced by them. And similarly, students also, we don't have data, but we can expect similar pattern is going on because the economic conditions that the SLBFE registered migrants and the others are facing in the country are somewhat similar. Even though we don't have good national level data, we have some evidence from recent IPS research that we did for these two groups. So we ran a small survey in April 2023 to understand about brain drain. And here, the respondents identified that majority of the people who are leaving are in high-skilled groups, professional or technical associate, manager, that type of workers. And then our findings on student migration, this is a little older, it was in 2020, we saw that majority of the students going overseas have been educated in government schools. So we have invested in their human capital from grade 1 to 13. And then they have, most of them, as you can see from this side, have completed up to year 13. And nearly half of them have even been accepted to one of the state universities, but they have chosen to go overseas. And then they're all doing bachelor's or higher degrees in their foreign education endeavors. So with this understanding of brain drain from Sri Lanka, let's see what are the issues and opportunities it has. I want to pick a few issues. We can't cover everything. So the first one is the vicious cycle of brain drain. When we have a shortage of skilled labor, what happens is it affects economic growth potential. And then that leads to lack of opportunities within the economy in Sri Lanka. And then when there are no opportunities, the high skilled or the professional people might have better offers overseas, and they kind of want to explore the other global labor market. So they tend to go overseas. So their departure will lead to further shortage of labor, not only affect the skills arising from that. And then another issue is the potential effect on our tax base. Now, high-skilled workers or professionals are likely to earn higher wages and ideally should be paying higher taxes, even though sometimes it doesn't happen in Sri Lanka. So that depletes the Sri Lankan economy of a segment that can contribute to the Sri Lankan tax revenue. And another issue that we would see is where brain waste can take place in the countries of destination. Why? Because sometimes people, highly qualified and professional people from Sri Lanka, might go overseas and their qualification might not be accepted in the same capacity in their countries of destination. And then they might have to end up working at a job that is lower than their full capacity. So then it tends to result in brain waste. But not everything is bad. There are a few positive implications of brain drain also. There is the capacity to attract higher remittances, financial remittances into Sri Lanka, because skilled workers or professionals are ideally well suited to earn higher wages and remit larger amounts to Sri Lanka. But then there is a catch. Professional workers often go with their whole family and they might not leave anybody behind to remit regularly. And even if, let's say it was a young professional who's leaving, he might have his elderly parents back at home, but the parents might be well off and the regular remittances are not so needed. So then there might not be potential for remittances. Then also there is social remittances. When a professional goes to another country, he might acquire new know-how and kind of share it with his counterparts in Sri Lanka. So the social remittances do come into Sri Lanka. And then also there are times we have seen that high-skilled professionals would go overseas, and after their period of work, they tend to come back to Sri Lanka for retirement or for a further period of working in Sri Lanka. So then that is brain circulation going on where they acquire the critical skills here, then they enhance it over the destination and come back with a lot of human capital, and they will put that into good use in Sri Lanka. So similarly, we have seen instances where professionals have returned to Sri Lanka and invested and started up very good companies. There's quite a lot of IT companies in Sri Lanka started by returned Sri Lankan migrants. And then also there is a possibility of brain gain, because with the anticipation of going overseas for foreign employment, those in Sri Lanka will try to acquire new skills or new qualifications so that it is easier for their migration process. But then we do know not everybody would end up going there. Not everybody would get a chance to go. So some of these people who have already acquired the higher qualification would remain in Sri Lanka. So then they will contribute to the human capital pool in Sri Lanka. So two clear examples is the Korean language learners in Sri Lanka. There's a huge number of people learning Korean language, but not everybody gets to go. And then similarly, right now, there is a lot of interest for potential migrants to seek caregiver qualifications so that they can go overseas easily, but then not everybody tends to go. And we have a good pool of caregivers in Sri Lanka. So this can be harnessed in other ways, maybe attract investment and have world-class health services in Sri Lanka and attract money in that way. But then this brain gain also has a tendency to be brain waste also sometimes, because as I said, sometimes when you know that you can go through a specific occupational group, people try to get that qualification. But those who are trying to get the qualification might be having a higher qualification from a different sector or a different occupation. Again, the caregiver example, I have personally heard a lot of examples where people qualified as quantity surveyors or in other sectors are considering or already have started taking caregiver training because caregiver opportunities are more overseas and it's a very quick path to go overseas for foreign employment. So then when they look at the income that they earn from their local job in quantity surveying versus the caregiver job overseas, there might be an income gain. However, it is uncertain whether there is job satisfaction for these people so that they will become, they will continue to be migrant workers and sustain in their migrant endeavors overseas. Now, let's come to talk about retaining human capital. So for us to successfully retain human capital, we need to know why they're going, what are the push factors, what are the pull factors for them to go. And then also we need good data to understand who's going, what are their characteristics, so that we can carve out good strategies to eliminate these push and pull factors or retain these migrant workers in a successful way so that we don't continue to hemorrhage human capital from Sri Lanka. So, interestingly, some of the most important macro level push factors are the country situation, like the policy environment, regulatory environment, the institutional governance environments, which cannot be fixed easily. And these problems are the ones that led to this hemorrhaging of human capital. So it is not easy to fix, but until we fix them, it is very hard to retain these high-skilled workers. And then if we improve them, we can have better living standards, efficient markets, and more employment opportunities, entrepreneurship, which will all lead into economic growth and economic opportunities, which will entice people to stay back rather than going overseas. Then another macro level push factor is the capacity constraints in a higher education sector. So recently we got these 2022 A-level results, and we saw that over 263 candidates sat for it and about 63% qualified for university admission. But when we look at previous data, we see that when 63 or 64% qualify for university, a very small number, about a quarter of it, in 2021, only 43,000 were admitted into universities in that year. And when you take the entire pool of university undergraduates in the public universities, that's all 3 or 4 years worth of students, is less than the amount of students who qualify for university in 1 year. So there is a huge capacity constraint in terms of higher education in the public education sector. So when people are eligible for higher education and cannot access it in Sri Lanka, they tend to pursue foreign education overseas. So this is, until we address this problem by some way of maybe liberalizing the education sector, we will continue to hemorrhage students out of the Sri Lankan human capital pool. And then there are also micro-level push factors where people would expect performance-based incentives or to have meritocracy in the workplace. When these things are not met, and when people know that the overseas employment situations offer this sort of better micro-level conditions, they tend to be attracted to foreign countries. And then also we see that a lot of professionals are very concerned about the education or the future of their children. And when the situation in Sri Lanka is not conducive um, for their children, they start thinking about overseas. Now, for instance, we heard recently that the O-level examination, which was supposed to be held in December 2023, was pushed so many times, and now it is going to be somewhere after April 2024. So this sort of changes and delays in the education system really affects decisions on migration of professional or high-skilled people. And also we see that, especially when it comes to medical professionals, they are very concerned about their children's education, because often medical professionals can be posted outstation in rural areas, and they have very different educational environment than in the cities, and these medical professionals are reluctant to relocate their families over there. And rather than splitting the family in Sri Lanka, they might consider going overseas where the family could stay together and there are better opportunities for everybody. So these are some of the factors, push factors from Sri Lanka. Then also there are pull factors from the country of destination. These include the better lifestyle, the career growth, and obviously the income and wage differential between the host and the home country. And also, as I said before, the opportunities for Sri Lanka, for the children. And also on top of that, we see that host countries are actively engaging, attracting human capital from countries like Sri Lanka. So now recently I heard that for some IT professionals, they have a very hefty relocation package where everything is taken care of. And I heard one IT professional saying that I just had to turn up at the airport and everything was taken care of, from his shipping of his personal items to immediate hotel accommodation to then permanent housing accommodation, children's education, everything was sorted. So when the host countries are actively pursuing these sort of attracting policies, and Sri Lanka is doing very little to minimize the push factors, there is a higher tendency for Sri Lankan professionals to leave and pursue opportunities overseas. So we have also seen in recent times, there have been some exit control policies to retain human capital in Sri Lanka. This has been most often crafted around the idea of paying back to what you have gained from the Sri Lankans.
I think there's a connectivity issue with Dr. Bilesha. Let's see how we can sort that out.
I'm back. Did you all lose me?
Yes, Doctor. Since the slide you started with exit control policies, yeah.
Exit. Okay,
yeah.
I'll start. All right. Should I share my screen again? Yes.
Yes, madam. Yeah. Dear viewers, please bear with us for a few minutes. Dr. Bilesha should be back soon. Okay, doctor. Now we can see you.
Weather is not cooperating with me today. It's about to rain, so there are some issues over here. So Sri Lanka also has had some exit control policies from time to time. And most often it is crafted along the concept of paying back for what you have acquired from Sri Lanka, or the human capital that you have acquired from Sri Lanka. So one example is the bond that medical professionals have to pay in return for the foreign training that they would gain. So what I found out was that for every year of foreign training that they get, they need to serve 4 years in Sri Lanka. If not, they have to pay back the stipend and the salary that they've earned during that time. But what I have seen is there is a gap in paying back for the 13 years of schooling, public schooling that they've acquired, and also the 4 or 5 years of medical schooling that they've acquired in Sri Lanka. But then at one point I was told by a medical doctor that the service they give as an intern covers for all this. So I think there has to be a very scientific way of quantifying how to give back, how to pay back if somebody benefits from the public funds for their human capital development and pursues migration. And then if you look at this little table on the slide, you will see that recently there has been a higher trend for Sri Lankan doctors to go overseas. So in 2021, when there were like 299 departures for foreign training. It jumped by almost 100 in 2022. And then when we look at the returns in 2021, when 204 returned, a much smaller 106 only returned in 2022. So there's a higher tendency to go and a lower tendency to come back. So all in all, we are losing medical professionals, as we've already heard in so many different ways. Then another exit control policy I want to highlight is it's not really an exit control policy. Initially, it started with an exit promotion policy or migration promotion policy with the intention of getting higher remittances. What I'm talking about is the 5-year no-pay leave policy for public sector workers. Why I want to highlight it is that it shows how our policy making is not factoring all aspects of migration when policies are made. So this policy was introduced with the intention of getting greater remittances by sending more people out. But later on, it became obvious that many Sri Lankans in the public sector want to go, and most of them were in the critical sectors like the health or the education sector. So then in hindsight, they had to put some exit control mechanisms saying that, okay, these two sectors are not allowed to migrate. And then also still when the public sector workers in other sectors were going, subsequently, it was realized that the very efficient and the very productive public sector workers are going, and it is going to impact the productivity and the output in the public sector. And now they've introduced another component saying that the seniority will be affected if you take 5 years no pay leave. Because initially when the policy was introduced, it was marketed saying that your seniority will not be compromised. You can stay out for 5 years and come back and carry on with your peers. But now they're introduced as an exit control mechanism, saying that your seniority will be compromised if you take a 5-year no pay leave. So it is very important to understand all aspects of migration when policies are made, not only remittances, not only migration promotion, but also how it will impact the national economy and the labor market as well. Then let's talk a little about human capital enriching. There are a few ways to enrich human capital, and one of the obvious is to train new entrants and upskill or reskill the existing workers in the labor market. But then I want to highlight on the other aspects. One is also to harness the potential of the brain gain that we might acquire because of the anticipation of foreign employment. Now, I said there is a big proportion of Sri Lankans acquiring the foreign the test. I'm sorry, the numbers are wrong here, but there was a very high number of Korean language test candidates, but the number of departures in that year was much smaller. Part of 2 digits of this is cut off, so I'm sorry, I don't have the proper number to say it. And then another way to enrich human capital is to attract Sri Lankans back or to get them to contribute to the Sri Lankan economy in some way. And the next way is to revisit attracting foreign nationals into Sri Lanka. So these 2 points I want to elaborate a little bit more. So about attracting Sri Lankans back into Sri Lanka. Now, Sri Lanka has a very restrictive Citizenship Act. In my opinion, right now, where we are hemorrhaging human capital and we want remittances, I don't think we have the luxury to cut the cord with Sri Lankans and call them not Sri Lankan citizens. So the existing Citizenship Act works like this. If an adult acquires a foreign citizenship, automatically his Sri Lankan citizenship is cancelled. And unless he applies for dual citizenship. For a child born overseas and has a foreign citizenship, but has a Sri Lankan citizenship by descent also, for such cases, when they reach the age of 21, their Sri Lankan citizenship is cancelled unless they apply for dual citizenship. In my opinion, Sri Lanka should try to retain and be connected to these Sri Lankans even after they acquire another citizenship, because they can contribute to the Sri Lankan economy and the Sri Lankan state in many ways if we continue to keep them as part of Sri Lankans. we have seen a lot of second and third generation Sri Lankans wanting to come back to Sri Lanka for various activities. They would come as part of their internship in their higher education. So these are high-skilled Sri Lankans, second or third generation Sri Lankans, and we should find ways to be connected with them rather than trying to disconnect them from the Sri Lankan system. So now we have a lot of examples from India, because India has done a wonderful job in terms of staying connected with their diaspora. So they have this concept of overseas Indians. Here, regardless of whether you were a citizen, whether you were born in Sri Lanka, in India, or whether you're a third or second generation Indian, all of them are categorized as overseas Indians. So the entire diaspora is considered overseas Indians, and they are given many benefits where there is an alternative citizenship scheme rather than dual citizenship for them. And then there are schemes for diaspora youth, where they have programs like Know India program or Study in India program, where they attract youth from the diaspora back into India. But in the case of Sri Lanka, diaspora is a thorny issue that everybody tries to sidestep. But there's huge potential in the diaspora. I think it's high time that we reconcile the issues that is connected to the ethnic conflict and try to harness the benefit of the overseas Sri Lankans and engage with them in whatever way we can. And next, again, another thorny issue. We need to carefully revisit bringing in foreign workers to Sri Lanka. So we need to understand where our comparative advantage and disadvantage is in human capital. And we have to kind of have a good mechanism to understand the recognized qualifications, to match that with the Sri Lankan workers, a good regulatory authority to oversee the aspects of migrant workers, and then open up certain sectors very carefully as a pilot project and see how we can benefit. Why? Because in our upcoming State of the Economy report, we show that previous efforts to bring foreign workers have been vehemently opposed by two professional groups, mainly those in the IT field and the medical field. But now emerging data shows that these two sectors are highly affected by brain drain. And it is high time we reconsider or revisit bringing in human capital to Sri Lanka. So a recent data collection effort showed that people's sentiments are changing, attitudes are changing. Now people are a little bit more accommodating to consider bringing in migrant workers to address the labor shortage in specific sectors. So with that, I want to come to my last point. It's about how we pitch the narrative of left behind. Now, we have to be very careful about how we talk about those who have not gone abroad. If we continue to say, oh, all the good people have gone, everybody has gone, what about the people who are back? What about us in the panel in Sri Lanka? We are not rotten apples left back in Sri Lanka. We are here because we have some other reasons to keep us back in Sri Lanka. So we need to change the narrative and say that, okay, some people do go, but we do have a good pool of human capital in Sri Lanka, and retain them and encourage them to stay, and also market them in a positive way so that we can attract investment, and also we can mitigate any possible herd effect where people continue to go because all their colleagues are going. And we have to figure out positive ways of harnessing the human capital of those remaining Sri Lanka. So there is more to talk. We will discuss over the Q&A. I'm sorry, I think I went a little bit overboard. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Bilesha, for that very comprehensive keynote address. I guess a lot of facts and data were there, and a lot of things to think about further. Okay, with that, we can now move towards a panel discussion. So let me invite Ms. Niroshi Pereira, Head of Applied Research from Frontier Research, to begin panel discussion. Ms. Niroshi Pereira is the Head of Applied Research at Frontier Research, as I mentioned earlier, a macroecon advisory group and responsible for initiating its inequality economics related research arm. Um, Nirosha holds an MSc in Poverty, Inequality and Development from the University of Birmingham, UK, which she attained on a Chevening scholarship granted by the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office in UK. Her research interests are in the broad spectrum of inequality economics with a focus on consumption and class inequality and the care economy. With that, Control Sabit Hiroshi.
Thank you very much, Kushan. So I'd like to start with introducing our panelists. So I'd like to start with Professor H.D. Karunaratne. Professor Karunaratne is the Vice Chancellor of the University of Colombo and a Senior Professor of Department of Business Economics, Faculty of Management and Finance. His academic research focuses mainly on entrepreneurship, international business, international migration, labor markets, income inequality, and international trade. According to ResearchGate, Professor H.D. Karunaratne has more than 126 research items and over 246 Google Scholar citations. On the international front, he is a recipient of the Japanese government's postgraduate research scholarship for 7 years, 1993 to 2000. He was also an invited professor in the faculty of the University of Economics of Hosei University, Tokyo in 2006, 2008, and 2016-2017. The Japan Foundation in Tokyo awarded him a senior researcher fellowship to conduct research at the University of Tokyo in October 2019. He was also awarded the Foreign Minister's Commendation by the Government of Japan in August 2021. Additionally, he serves as the Director, Institute of Human Resource Advancement, University of Colombo, and was Chairman of the Governing Council of the Institute of Policy Studies from 2020 to 2023. In addition, Professor Karunaratne has held many academic positions during his 30-year stint there to date. I welcome Professor Karunaratne to our panel discussion today. And then we've got Mr. Jonathan Ullis, who is the Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer of Hatton National Bank, PLC. He counts over 37 years of banking experience, having served several international banks, including the National Bank of Abu Dhabi, Saudi British Bank Riyadh, British Bank of the Middle East and HSBC, Dubai and Colombo, before taking on the reins at HNB. He served on many boards within the HNB group as well as in the banking industry. Mr. Ullis is a director of the Sri Lanka Banks Association and was its chairman from 2014 to 2016. In 2018, he was elected chairman of Asian Bankers Association, a position he held for 3 years and is currently a member of its board of directors and also serves as the chairman of the advisory committee. Welcome, Mr. Ullis. And the final panelist of us who will be featuring today is Mr. Ashik Ali, who has over 30 years of experience in technology entrepreneurship and senior management, with extensive experience in international business. He is the managing director at Taliance, partnering with global IT suppliers and customers in US, UK, Germany, France, Finland, Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, and Australia. He is a founding member of the Sri Lanka Association of Software Service Companies, most commonly known as SLASCOM, and served as chairman in 2022-2023 after joining the board in 2017. He supports initiatives in policy, global trade and investment, talent and capacity, entrepreneurship, diversity and regional development, and centers of excellence in products and platforms, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and intelligent automation. As SLASCOM nominee, he served as member of the National Export Strategy Formulation Team, the Presidential Task Force for IT BPM Exports, the Presidential Task Force for Education Reform from 2017 to 2021. He is currently serving as committee member of the Sri Lanka Export Development Board ICT BPO Advisory Committee, who he's been a member of since 2013, BOI Industry Advisory Committee, Colombo Port City Technology Committee, the Central Bank Sectoral Engagement Committee, National Education Reform Committee, National AI Strategy Committee, Digital Economy Committee, faculty board member of the Sabaragamu University, Ceylon Chamber of Commerce Council for Startups Committee, and council representative at the Global Technology and Business Service Council. Welcome, Mr. Ali. to start off the conversation, I'd like to direct questions to the private sector representatives we've had today. And then we will also move on to hear from Professor Karunaratne. So in terms of what Dr. Bilesha gave us context about, the brain drain conversation about skilled migration, Mr. Alas and also Mr. Ali, what have you got to say about how the perspective that you have in your sectors and how this has affected the workspaces that you're in?
Niroshi, Ashik, are you going in first or do you want me to come in?
Please go ahead, Jonathan.
Right. Thanks very much. So firstly, thanks Niroshi, thanks Kushan, Dimutu, as well as the Center for Banking Studies at the Central Bank of Sri Lanka for having me. It's wonderful to be on this, as well as I think Dr. Bilesha got us off to a good start with that very broad, overview of, brain drain, some of the gains as well as some of the losses that we could do and what we should actually do about it. Getting very specific to the banking industry and HNB, probably a good place to start would be what has happened within at HNB, what we used to experience for an organization that has a little over 5,000. We were used to losing around 200 staff per year. And of that 200, it was about 20 that used to leave due to migration. But since over the last 5 years, in 2022, what we have seen is that number of 200 has doubled to 400. And the attrition, which was 3-4%, it was actually around 1-2%, going up to 3-4%, now gone up to 7-8%, is quite significant. But the more revealing data would be that out of that 400, over 170 left for migration purposes, and the categories of what Bilesha mentioned. And looking at 2023, not looking any greater, with the number expected to exceed 500, about 520, of which over 225 might be for migration, where the percentage would be about 40 to 45%. And that would also mean that an attrition rate of 10%. So you can see that over the last 3-4 years, there's been a drastic shift in terms of, people leaving, and we have had to recruit at a rapid pace, at a pace that we have never done hitherto. And this is causing a lot of challenges, within. We spoke of some of the reasons why these are happening. I mean, there was no need to repeat them, while some are basically looking to, greener pastures, looking to further their studies, looking for, whether it's economic, social, or political. The thing is about economic, if it's personal, it's not too bad in that, people go, they make their income, and they could come back, and then the brain gain can actually take place. But if it's actually economic driven by social and political, the instability, policy inconsistency, and the lack of countrywide economic development, then people are looking actually to go and settle down and secure themselves, as secure their families, their children, and that would be a longer term thing. Then you're looking at really a brain drain. And in our case, what we are seeing with this exodus, whilst it could be argued that most of it is at the junior grades, so you could say that replacing them might be less of a challenge, albeit you need to realize that today's junior staff coming out of school are not the same that came out 10 years, 20 years, and 30 years back. So that in itself is a challenge. in terms of what exactly would make banking sticky for this youth segment. How do we make it interesting for them? And on the top of it, when they are in we spoke of the herd issue of people wanting to sort of move out following their friends and relatives. The challenge becomes it's an added challenge to us. So what we have actually done in terms of trying to manage this, first and foremost, is massive recruitment has taken place. But still what it means is that the staff who are at our counters, who are available there, are very new. And this is at a time when banking regulation is getting more complex, it's getting more detailed, client requests, client needs are becoming more sophisticated, and the need to basically digitalize, in which means you first need to know your banking, you need to know your products, you need to know your processes before you even start to think about automation, digitalization, and understanding. So it requires knowledgeable staff. So it's a challenging time, and it puts a lot of pressure on the existing staff as well, who have got to manage day to day, in addition to making sure that you train and motivate and develop the new staff. I'm not saying that, we can't manage with them. We can and we have to, but it's a new challenge that was not envisaged that it would be, so severe. So from our point of view, we need to make it as attractive as possible in terms of not limiting banking to what it was 20, 30 years back, make it a little more exciting, bring the online aspects, gaming, the modules of training has got to be different. You can't put them on 3-4 week programs. It has to be short bursts. It has to be new ways of communicating to them. And we need to bring new forms of contract. Not everybody is thinking of, working 35, 40 years like some of us from the day they joined banking. People may be looking at shorter contracts, working from home, 4-hour spurts, 6-hour spurts. We'll need to think out of the box. We need to innovate to make sure what could be the ideal workforce to do the different types of new types of jobs also that are emerging in trying to keep them. And then in parallel, whilst I spoke of, let's say, the 40% migration of a fairly significant number leaving at HNB every year, I would think the industry statistics would be somewhat similar. Like I would think we would have lost about 10,000 at the industry is pretty significant. And what the industry would need to do, whilst we would continue to recruit, we also need to safeguard a very important industry as Sri Lanka tries to come out of, bankruptcy and in the ruts that we are in, as we try to come out in order to, revive our country, to support the renaissance of our customers. We need to make sure that the banks remain strong, that the industry remains strong. As such, it's an opportune time, time at when some of us have got, impaired by, credit deterioration and other potential haircuts on the horizon. It's important that banks get bigger. So banking consolidation, non-banking financial institution consolidation is something that might be important. Looking at larger banks, then looking at more specialized banks, not trying to be everything to everyone, but being meaningful to banks. So you can look at savings banks, you can look at commercial banks, development banks, mortgage banks, rather than trying to do, like I said, be everything to everyone and end up being no one to, nothing to no one, basically. So basically, that is important. And then as we, probably the most important thing that comes to mind, Niroshi, is the importance of digitalization at a time when we will need to tighten our belts, we would need to maintain operating costs. The same way the country needs to digitize, the government needs to digitize in order to be more transparent, to bring in more governance, to track their procurements, payments, etc. Now, these tend to get facilitated through the banking industry. It's important that the banking industry also leads in this regard. The digital ID becomes paramount in addition to many other interventions that need to be brought in fairly quickly. And we need to make sure that whether it's the front end, the middleware processors, and the back end data, etc., are all digitalized to the extent that we can actually run our internet banking, mobile banking platforms, and our customers can enjoy the same or even better experience that they have at our counters, by on their mobiles and on their iPads and laptops. So when you do that, also the need for additional branches are probably not required. We could scale down branches. We can scale down some of the duplicated ATMs and SSMs, the self-service devices that we have in multiples in towns, etc. Reduce costs and deploy them more meaningfully, and then rationalize branches, rationalize products like I earlier alluded to, and run a more efficient, seamless operation, both digitally as well as a lean operation. And this would help, managing some of the staffing issues that we might be facing. So make banking interesting. We see, in some of the public sector, loads and loads of staff where, they're idle, they're just standing and waiting with things stuck in their ears and a mobile in their hand, and, they're completely not productive. Now, this is not what we require. So what we are doing, as Dr. Bilisha alluded to, is we are letting go our professionals because we are not paying them enough, and keeping some of the low-skilled people around. And that needs to change. We need to get very clear in terms of our focus. We'll need to have, leaner, meaner organizations, more professional organizations, and we will need to pay them well before we actually start to, just letting our people go and bringing other people from outside, which is, a necessary evil, I guess, in the short to medium term. But we must also know what needs to be done on this end. I'll probably pause there and then come in later on any follow-up question, Niroshi.
Sure. Ms. Talas has actually given us very important insight into the situation, and also he's given us important information on how we can stay relevant, not only to the next generation of employees, but also when trends change, and how to tackle this challenge well. So now I'd like to direct the conversation towards Mr. Ali, and any insights that you have or any perspectives that you'd like to share.
Thank you, Niroshi, and thank you, Kushan, for inviting me. And good opening note by Dr. Bilisha. Fellow panelists, all the audience who have joined, good afternoon or good evening. So let me wear my SLASCOM hat here and talk about the industry in its whole. So if you take the economic impact of the industry, we did close to about we estimate about $1.7 billion of exports in 2022. This was enabled by about 144,000 people working in the sector. And what is significant here is that the value addition of this $1.7 billion is about 80 to 90%, which means a large part of that income goes in terms of paying salaries for people who are working in the industry. So it's retained in the country and contributes into the economy. With export and the domestic IT and BPM put together, it's about 4.5% to the GDP, as estimated by the Department of Census and Statistics. Close to about 80% in the sector earn over 100,000. So with the new tax regime in place, a large part of the workforce are also taxpayers, and they are high income earning workforce, which also contributes to the high levels of consumptions and related indirect taxes. So it's a key economy. The sector is a key economic driver, not only for itself, but in many of the other adjacent sectors as well. So if you look at the labor force itself or the workforce itself, low attrition has been one of the key attraction for Sri Lanka. Many foreign companies, or the way we attracted work was because when we compare ourselves to the region, whether it's South Asia or even Southeast Asia, as supply countries, we are one of the lowest in attrition. And that led to attracting certain types of work or projects which had longer duration cycles. So when you retain those talents, the projects are a lot more manageable, a lot more predictable. The outcomes are more predictable, and the investment that goes into the training, etc., remains in the project itself. So this has been one of the key things. So obviously, when 2022, 2023 happened, and as any other sector, and as some of the statistics shared by Dr. Dilisha, we are a significant part of those numbers. So when we look at between 2019 and the base of 2022, 2023, because COVID actually skewed some of those numbers, we have seen almost double. So when we say attrition, there are two. Immigration is a subcomponent of, or migration is a subcomponent of attrition. There is people moving within the industry, that also is attrition, and people moving out of the country for jobs, that's migration. So it's within. Migration is within. So we've seen both doubling, mainly because people left, then people internally got opportunities. There was, companies offering competitive offers to be able to attract people working in other companies. So it saw both of them doubling. We estimate between 2022 and the first half of 2023, we have lost close to about 8,000 to 11,000 people to migration. Now, interestingly, in our industry, there is something called virtual migration as well. This is where Sri Lankans are sitting here, but not necessarily working for a Sri Lankan company. They are actually remote working for a company overseas and getting paid dollars directly. One can argue that the money is coming here, but they are necessarily not working for as an industry here. They are working for outsiders, outside companies. Then when we kind of dwell a little bit deeper into who is migrating, in our industry, our experiences, it's the middle to higher tier. This is typically the 3 to 8 year experience pool. And this impacts us in so many levels. One thing it affects, because these are those anchor employees who are in the forefront of managing customers and deliveries. So it impacts productivity to begin with, right? And secondly, that it also, they are the ones who are actually onboarding new talent into the industry. They are so then providing that training, mentoring, support thing. So it impacts bringing in the new talent as well. As much as new talent is available, onboarding them and getting them into productive work, there is a challenge. And this limited pool now, because of the migration, is facing the dual stress sort of thing, because they have to have a higher stress in delivering and a higher stress in training people as well. There was also an inherent stress because of work models, because our industry was almost 100% work from home throughout the pandemic. And even globally, that has not changed much. A large part of our workforce still work from home, and that or hybrid working model, and that leads to a lot more project management stresses anyways, productivity stresses and things like that. So it's a bit in the middle management, it's a lot challenging for people, and with the diminishing workforce there led to migration, there is even more stress there. Then we also have to pay attention to the supply side, because that is human capital supply is very important to us. So these are the schools and the universities, both state and non-state. And there too, apart from the student migration, we have the teachers and academics migrating out as well. And this is now impacting the quality of supply from those education institutions. That's also is going to be a medium to long-term impact for the industry as to how we are going to develop new quality talent for the industry. Then, yeah, it's SLASCOM's role. I personally go visit universities, have industry talks, not just for this purpose, but also to align academic studies to employability skills. But in the recent months, what we see is that students studying both in state and non-state universities also have the intention to go abroad for their higher education, whether it's master's or even to complete a degree program where they're doing 2 years here, 3 years here, and the remaining years overseas. So this also is now going to see some of these students in the university system going out of the country as well. And beyond that, we also saw, I think Dr. Divisha referred to this, the delaying of local examinations, both in O-level streams and A-level streams. We are seeing students now, especially students who are financially able, to now dropping the local syllabuses and moving on to the London syllabuses, which means they will not qualify for a local university entrance. So they are now also looking at private universities and foreign university education. So we are kind of setting up a sort of a downstream or upstream kind of, what can I say, factors, which is going to have a ongoing level of people trying to move out of the country. These are some of the things that are really affecting or impacting the industry. Maybe in the follow-up questions, I will talk to about how we are taking certain mitigation strategies and also some of the key factors that are really driving this migration. Over to you, Divisha.
Thank you, Mr. Ali. I think Mr. Ali elaborated on a point that really sets the stage for my question to Professor Karunaratne. That is, we've discussed migration and the challenges that two industries are facing. So, Professor Karunaratne, in your perspective, how has the higher education sector that Mr. Ali also mentioned been affected, and what have you seen in this scenario?
Thank you very much for inviting me and all the panelists and enlightening by the Vilecha. Thank you, this discussion. I have PowerPoint slides. I will come back a little bit small. And before that, I have one message to give, that higher education in Sri Lanka is misunderstood. Passing advanced level does not mean to go to university. There are another two sectors where we are not talking about: professional education sector and technical education sector, or maybe third one, multitasking or multi-skill education sector. So in Sri Lanka, everybody wants to get university degrees. That is not a solution. That the biggest issue in the Sri Lanka is the number of professionals producing in the country is very low. All the professional institutes, if you see how many enroll and how many pass out as a professional in that particular institute. You see, for example, when I joined the university, there were only 5,200 students in 1982 taken to universities. Now today we take 45,000 into universities. So 9 times increased the university enrollment in Sri Lanka. Can you tell me which professional organization increased the 9 times of professionals in Sri Lanka? So my issue is that the higher education is misunderstood. Many people say that we need to give degrees for all, but it is not the society. In advanced countries, the larger number of people go for professionalism. We are talking about migration by producing less than 2,000 doctors per year. But if you compare in the South Asian countries per year, how many doctors are producing? How many lawyers are producing? How many, say, if you take any profession, any other profession, engineers, are we producing enough engineers in Sri Lanka? While producing less than 2,000, 3,000 engineers, we say that the university should be expanded. No, what we need to understand higher education very clearly, those who are qualifying advanced level, they should not go to all 100% into universities. What we need to increase professional education in Sri Lanka, number of professionals who particularly there. The second is the technological education, technical education is not expanding as universities. If you take the entire higher education, I think other two sectors, professional education and technical education is not expanding. Everyone pushing to expand the universities come to even the professional institute now giving degrees. So this is the only country that we can see professional institutes giving university degrees. So the situation is different and it has gone to far below the advanced level also now. Some people are promoting, don't do the advanced level and then go for some matching course and go for degree in a lesser number of years, you can complete the degree. It's a myth in the advanced country. Why? Because in the advanced level period only, we can train people for sports, extracurricular activities, leadership in the school, that there are many things we learn from the advanced level period. Just covering the bridging up course, going into a university, then after getting a degree, what are their job markets? There will be a serious issue. So this higher education, I think we have to clearly understand first. My second thing, what I am explaining that we need to understand that there is a brain drain, as Dr. Vilesha explained, brain circulation, brain gain. Now it is the brain circulation period in globally. Let me to share. Can I share my PowerPoint slides, one or two? I'm not taking much time.
Yes, sir, you can.
Yeah, okay. Now let me to share small ideas with these PowerPoint slides. What you can see here, I'm not going to elaborate all. What I want to see that Sri Lanka, of course, is a migration country from the very beginning, from the inception of the independence, we have been sending people out. But my main argument, of course, is it a brain drain or brain circulation? Now you can see in a globally integrated knowledge economy, the circulation of professionals and skilled workers are inevitable. Why? Due to these reasons, rational decision making by individual maximizers. Those who invested in higher education, they are going for higher benefit from any place in the world. We all are living in the global village. We should not be only in one place. Anyone can go any place and work at. The only thing that we need to have patriotism, we need to connect the country and connect the society here. And bottlenecks of employment opportunities in public sector and private sector. That's why people migrating. The changing structure of the economic activities. There are many new areas where those jobs are not available in the country. And the opportunity for high technological entrepreneurship. Some are moving for foreign countries. Access to leading clusters of research and innovation. The globalization of R&D activities and national firms. These are also very important. And what I said that you can see in this graph, brain circulation is the most important. The doctor's brain circulation in the world. Now you can see that the countries who are sending abroad as doctors, India, even UK is now having a problem. They are also seeking that their doctors how to stop, but they are relatively producing large number of doctors than Sri Lanka. That is another thing. So the brain circulation is the most important. Anyone can go to any place and come back. So with these things, finally, I would like to take several issues here. What are the real issues related to migration from Sri Lanka? Number one, information deficiency in the country. We do not have exact data on the human capital development, the human capital supply and demand and migration data. Data problems are there. The second, producing less number of professionals and skilled workers. I want to reiterate that with respect to our population or in par with our per capita income, other countries are producing larger number of professionals and particularly technical staff, technological educated people rather than only university degree holders. The lack of STEM education due to insufficient qualified teachers. As we know that there are 10,000 schools in Sri Lanka. Only 3,000 schools has mathematics, English, and science teachers. The large number of schools, they don't have teachers to teach these STEM subjects. So as a result, our arts faculties are full with the students because rural area. And the high income tax for skilled professional workers due to lack of database in the tax collectors. The tax collectors, for easiness, they charge higher taxes for professionals because of the weakness of the data set. In foreign countries, I think many countries, they have high tax income because their database is very wide. It is accepted in Sri Lanka because of the data deficiency. We have lack of income, revenue generation, but it has gone now to shifted to professional people. And higher prices of goods due to lack of production, high energy cost, high importation of goods and services. So we are not producing goods and services. Then we are importing goods and services. Then there's a huge pressure on the exchange rate. So as a result, we have to increase prices in domestically, all retail and everywhere. So poor management remittances of lack of marketing system and the weak institutions, lack of financial literacy, and the irrational behavior of consumers. So these are some important aspects we need to talk, because the brain drain or educated people going abroad is a very small issue. But we are having a large issue which is connected to this educated people migration. So therefore, we have to focus on these issues. We need to produce more professionals. And of course, we have to have a general perception about what is higher education, not to expand only universities, but to produce more professionals and technical people. So the few technical people and few professionals produce, they are going abroad. We say that this is a brain drain. This is not a brain drain when we compare with the other countries. So therefore, what we have to focus, STEM education and increasing number of professionals in the country. So this is my initial discussion that I would love to answer some questions with others. Thank you very much.
In terms of the insights that Professor Karunaratne has now shared with us, which was a different perspective on looking at brain drain overall, Dr. Bilesha, would you have some perspective on any alternative recommendations that you would propose?
Yes, hi. Alternative recommendations on retaining, I suppose.
Yes, that would be it. Yes.
Yes. So one thing, like what our private sector professionals were mentioning, at the firm level, a lot of effort can be taken what the state cannot do to retain workers. Maybe provide matching offers. It might be hard, but if the worker is worthwhile, it is a gain to provide the matching offer and retain them and provide incentives for them to remain in Sri Lanka. Then also this is a short-term measure, I'm telling. But in the long term, we have to kind of instill. I think one of the other panelists also insinuated about patriotism a little bit, and also giving back, the responsibility to give back. So people have to be made understood that they're given free education from 1 to 13, and it is better if they can contribute back to the Sri Lankan economy in some way. It's better if they go out, acquire more skills of professionalism, and come back. So kind of from school age itself, instill these qualities that you have to give back. You have to, return the favor that you got from the state. And also from the state side, gradually we have to be more open about staying in contact with our diaspora. I don't like to use the word because it's not very pleasant for many people. But if we can keep them connected, this retaining becomes a little bit easier, because it's not only retaining, then it's about I think there was a comment also about circular migration. So it doesn't matter where one is, if you can stay connected with Sri Lanka, you can gain a lot. So it is not only retaining, we have to think about enriching, nurturing, and okay. All right. So I don't know which part you all lost me at. But what I was saying was that at the firm level, we can do certain things. I think that was heard. But the other part I was telling is a little bit of a longer idea
Connecting
of
with
having
the
to pay back.
diaspora. And
Okay.
connecting with the diaspora.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it is now, we don't have to stop at retention of workers or professionals. We have to think the long term, because by going overseas, they can acquire better skills. And if we have a way of keeping them connected in the loop with Sri Lanka, there is a lot more to gain. We just don't have to cut the cord once they leave Sri Lanka. We have to develop good mechanisms to keep them connected with us, so that it is not only a matter of retention, we can let them go, but still continue to stay in touch with them and benefit from them, and also give them something back in benefit too, not only gain from them. Thank you.
Yes. Dr. Bilesha, I'd also like to ask you if we can maybe put the recent numbers. You said there are obviously lack of data and constraints, but if we can put those numbers in context with maybe historical data, have we seen such a wave of migration before? Have we managed despite it?
You mean the total number of migration that we've seen in 2022? We
Yes,
have had
versus
similar numbers. Yes, over 300,000 has been there before 2015 or so. There has been higher numbers, so we have been able to manage it. But then the reasons were different. I think the reasons for migration was not the economic issue in the country, and people were not leaving because they can't make it here so much. Not everybody was leaving like that, but now it's like a blanket situation that everybody wants to go for a specific reason that is difficult in the country. Did I answer you correct?
Yes, you did. So if I could maybe pivot from that to Professor Karnaratne, you did mention a couple of reasons as to why people are leaving. If you could elaborate a little bit more on why this situation has become this way.
Thank you very much for giving this opportunity. That in economic theory tell us that migration is alternative for international trade. If we produce more goods, export to other countries, there are many jobs in the country, people don't want to migrate. But from the independence, our export sector was very weak, and we could not develop substantial goods to exporting other countries. Particularly, we could not utilize the excess labor created by the population bonus in the country. So as a result, within the country, there were no enough jobs. Then what has happened that due to the war period and other situation, the government expanded public sector employment almost 3 times. According to our per capita income and the country's production level, I think about 800,000 public sector employment possible, but it went into 1.5 million or 1.6 million because of this unemployment issue. So therefore, I think if we produce more goods, we would have export more, then the migration would not have happened in the country. So since large investment has not come to Sri Lanka and our FDI also very weak, only option for the Sri Lankans that they had to go abroad. Actually, there were about 12 waves of migration from the independent to today. I'm not going to explain all. In the literature cited that soon after the independence that the ex-Europeans migrated to Australia. That's the starting point. Then of course later the significant one, the Sirima Shastri Pact. According to that, we send some Sri Lankan state sector employees to India. And of course, the war is one of the another view. During the war period, the ethnic groups migrated to other countries. And of course, after the war, and people started working in Middle East also, and particularly this migration for education and the educated people migration is the latest phenomenon happening. So we need to understand that why people go abroad for education. It is not merely to get a degree. It is to find an employment opportunity there, or find a connection to those countries because that they want to accompany their families or something in later. The other situation that, they go to other countries because the professional education is highly limited in the country. For example, medical and of course engineering and of course law and maybe accounting. These special education areas, professionalism, the only few people in the graduate here. So therefore, that people want to go to other country and be a doctor or be an engineer because they know these professions are the most demanded jobs in the world. So that is, those are the reasons. Even if we open many universities here, they will migrate because their purpose is to find an employment opportunity and earn more money after the education. So therefore, we need to understand the ground realities, why people migrate and how it happens. This is a long-term phenomenon in the country. But my suggestion is that we need to see the supply side of the migrants. So that is not only the university degrees, but also professionals, and the technical education is very weak in the country. So as a result, what is happening, they are coming to universities. So this education structure is itself is a problem of migration. I think it's the one of the reasons behind the migration.
Thank you, Professor Karunaratne. So Professor Karunaratne has emphasized on the not just like education sector. He's mentioned that there is a lack in terms of professional skills and upgrading themselves beyond universities. So I'd like to then ask a question from Mr. Ali. In your perspective, while we discuss education, do you think there has to be structural changes in the job market, or what employment opportunities we provide? Because you did earlier say there are ways of tackling that you have looked at. So if you could elaborate on that further.
Yes, on that particular point, yes, if you look at our university education system, as much as we say it's free, it's still afforded to only a very select number of people, mainly because of the resource constraint in the state sector, state universities. So everybody else will then aspire to get a qualification from a private university, or for that matter a professional institute or professional body, or there is also the vocational technical stream that the professor alluded to. So as an industry, we tap into all three, right? Because they fit into different, because when you say IT and BPM, the job roles within it, as much as in any other industry, there are requirements of various skill levels, various proficiencies, and different education streams produce the relevant skills for those. So in that sense, overall, what we as industry see, and I think this is some to a great extent even globally, is that there has always been that gap between education and employability, and that leads to unemployment or underemployment, all these things, right? And it's also not producing the right type of qualifications for the in-demand jobs. So we tend to also produce in some areas a large number where there is no employment opportunities, whereas in other areas where there is demand and you don't find the supply, even to retrain. So as an industry, IT BPM industry, we look at it from a slightly broader canvas and look at all these education streams, even post A-level. We don't stick only to people who have gone into higher education, but even post A-level, how can we skill them in order for them to be able to be getting a gainful employment in the industry. We also not only look at people joining the industry, but continuous education. So in Sri Lanka, the student loan concept is in its very infant stage, right? People have to, if it's non-state universities or non-state higher education, for that matter, everybody has to pay. And that means a significant pressure on families to bear that cost. Now, what we are doing is we are sort of enabling people to get entry-level jobs so that they have an employment. And in our industry, we pay reasonably well in that entry level, so that then the banks and financial institutions feel confident that they are able to lend. And that lending is towards education, so that they don't stagnate from what they enjoy, they joined into the industry, but they're able to then progress through their career while working. And for us, in our industry, that also leads to retention, a little bit more stickiness, because when the company also then sponsors or allows this work study kind of, or study work kind of concept, the people tend to stay longer, typically 4 to 5 year tenure, which then actually at the end of that qualification stream produces a much more rounded professional, both with qualification as well as experience and relevant industry insights. So that's kind of the education piece which I wanted to bring in, how our industry addresses this. As Flascom, and now in a larger sense, we have launched the National Future Talent Initiative, where we have taken all stakeholders around. We are going into the school levels, as much we are not relying on government to do the education reform. But we have picked up, look at the elements of those education reforms and seeing how, as industry, we can impact that even in a smaller scale, just to be a catalyst of change. So even in schools, grade 8 upwards onwards, we have started introducing IT, problem-solving based education, critical thinking, those kind of things, even though the traditional education is about rote education, memorizing and passing an exam, we kind of bring these dimensions in. And we take it right through to the university education in all streams, vocational, professional, certification, all of this. Coming back to the earlier reason of why people are leaving, from our industry perspective, what we are seeing is, first and foremost, have we seen this before? Yes, we did see this before, because our industry is only about almost close to 3 decades. The profound nature of this was felt in 2008, 2009, at the height of war, when things were escalating before the ultimate end of that war. So there was a very large, not just the ethnic minority, but even others felt threat to their lives, and they felt also that the war will be much longer drawn out, so people left the country, and we saw similar numbers going. But soon after, 2009 saw the war ending, and then everybody envisioned that there will be a better Sri Lanka, more prosperous, more unified Sri Lanka. Um, Fortunately, unfortunately, the global financial crisis also happened at the same time. So the countries that people were migrating to also saw recession, mass unemployment, etc. So that kind of created that brain gain kind of situation back into the country. So we saw 2011, 2012, 2013 people, especially in our sector, starting to coming back into the industry. But this time around, as much as there was disenchantment with corruption and bad governance and all that, which led to the political instability, there is also that whole financial issue where people felt the higher cost of living, living standards, erosion of living standards, scarcity. All this started kind of affecting them very personally at all levels, right? And beyond that, the lending rates, everything increasing. There was, the things that actually root people to a country. It's like owning a home, right? Owning a car. This is where, people will start putting their roots down. There were affordability issues there. People could no longer afford this. So this kind of then, people education for children, those also were spoken of. So those are some of the key drivers that prompted people to look at migration, where other countries offered those much more easily affordable, right? So everybody thought, but we are seeing the other side of this also right now. So these were some of the core issues. Also in the healthcare industry, we saw the medical profession, shortage of medical profession, drugs, essential drugs. So these are things which people felt, things which are more essential, core to their lives, which is now becoming difficult to find, so to speak. And that kind of is now kind of driving this. But having said that, we are also seeing those who have gone out are seeing a little different picture out there. Yes, the second half of 2022, we saw that kind of red carpet treatment that Dr. Bilisha was referring to, especially in our sector, where people were taken care of from the point of arriving in the country, even paid for their tickets, given housing, all that was there. But that's no longer there. Now things have become where people are being very competitive to get jobs. And even then, they are not getting jobs at the levels in which they should be getting. And in those countries also, if you see, some of these countries are having 6-7% inflation, and those inflation there are very profound because it affects housing, mortgage costs, energy costs, heating costs, which is really stacking up for the amount of money that they can earn and what they can live with. So these are now kind of also reducing the rate of migration, but that's not to say the intent to migrate is quite heavy. The number of people who have put their migration papers, but who have not readily got it as how they got it in 2022, because in 2022, we saw a lot of these things happening in a very fast track manner. But now these foreign migration authorities are taking a lot longer to process. But we should be prepared that there would be another wave coming as well. If there are any other follow-up question as to what strategies for retention, I'll take it later. If you want me to cover now, I can cover that as well.
I'd like to move fast to Mr. Alas, and then maybe if you have more time, I'll bring it back to you, Mr. Ali.
Sure, thank you.
Yes, so Mr. Alas, Mr. Ali touched on a couple of really good points to unpack. Are the pastures really green on the other side? And then the other one was, what sort of investments can we make to human capital to retain them? So Dr. Bilisha mentioned it as well. So from your perspective, within the current economic landscape, how effective is it to up the salary scales, give more benefits to retain these employees?
Thanks very much, Niroshi. So maybe I'll flip it a little bit. Why don't we make the pastures greener on this side and basically instead make do all the corrections on this and make instead of having the push factor here from Sri Lanka, let it be a pull factor to sort of retain here. So I think what I'm going to cover in the next minute or two is about, I think it has an impact on us not having to go out, and equally importantly, why others would want to come in. I think indirectly we have kind of alluded to the elephant in the room, though probably indirectly, is that there is lack of growth, there is lack of economic development in the country. The fact that, whilst I applaud and appreciate the efforts that have been made in the recent past, post the financial debacle, economic turmoil, social unrest that we have gone through over the past year or so, it has not been the case over the past few decades. So we have missed the bus time and time again. We have been procrastinating, we have been talking a lot, and lack of leadership, lack of vision, capability. We can talk a lot. I mean, there's a lot of ideas. Everything is for the long term. The only thing I know about the long term is that, we are probably all going to be dead by that time. How do we actually start doing some stuff now in order to, give some confidence to the people? Because already it's established that the people are moving because they don't have any confidence in the country and our ability to come out and will be provide a future for themselves and their children. And people are taking big chances, big risks in going out. As Ashik mentioned, not everything is green. On the other side, it can get tougher as recession, sort of emerges. It's not going to be easy even on those fronts, but they're just willing to take that chance because they see no hope. So I'd probably like to talk about the importance of, and this is not just about, we have already established the importance of brain, gain, that brain circulation is good, as well as the only issue being about the actual drain if it's going to be a long-term thing. So how do we actually make it attractive and give confidence for people is about getting Sri Lanka back onto let's say a growth trajectory. To do that, we must have a clear plan, we must get more efficient. We talk about wasteful expenditure, we need to cut out on those unwanted investments. Let's just avoid divesting. We spoke about, I think Professor mentioned about how the state sector has expanded, that needs to contract. You need to have more private enterprise, you need more small government, you need large private enterprise. People need to be encouraged, to start producing in the economy, in addition to what was mentioned in education. One aspect that I would like to strongly bring in is the need for, entrepreneurial programs. Sri Lanka, while needing more graduates and professionals and technocrats, also requires a lot of entrepreneurs because they directly impact GDP. The more entrepreneurs that we are able to produce, then that's why we need to support Ashik's industry. We need to find a way of funding them through venture capital or, through private equity. How much can banks come in and support? We have got small challenges within this group of people who have gone. There are quite a few who have taken loans and gone, but, and we are unable to contact some of them, but that's okay. It's all part of, doing business. We will continue to do this, but we just need to find better structures to operate. So it's all about getting development going. We spoke about entrepreneurship, manufacturing, creating GDP, exports, continuing to support the service industry, IT being important. A classic example that yesterday, we were talking about now more universities coming in. We'll need to get some universities from out. We've been talking about it a lot, but not implementing it. And it's time for us to get done. I know that right now there's serious intent in bringing universities as well as converting some of the colleges to universities. All that is very good, because it's not only about basically preventing people from having to go out, and instead they've got a very viable alternative to study here. But you can actually bring in foreign students who would love to come to Sri Lanka and study. And in that process, if we are unable, and some would not be able to afford it, this is where, when I use the word diaspora, I actually use it to most of the Sri Lankans who have gone out. I don't refer only to the Tamil community as such. So they can actually look at funding strategies, creating educational funds, how to support their communities in terms of, educating them here. But it goes beyond. When you talk of brain gain, in addition to them coming back and then giving back, I'm just going to give a quick example of myself, right? Now, when I went out overseas, cross-posted from the bank that I was in, I had the choice of then going on to, migrate to another Western country. But I chose consciously, to come back here because I wanted to give back. So in all humility, I'm probably saying that's probably one way of, let's say, my thinking of giving back. But the diaspora goes even many steps further. They are greatly networked. They can actually start businesses here. They can be an instrumental part in bringing FDIs, create companies, create employment, support the students here to continue to study here. And if we become efficient, leaner and meaner in terms of, hiring for value and being productive in our organizations, again was told to me yesterday by head of a institution. People come early in the morning, they have their teas and read the papers. They only work from the tea break to the lunch break, and then immediately after, then they're getting ready to go home. These things have got to change. People have got to be productive. So we need the right numbers who are productive and who are delivering value. That will allow us to answer your second question. Can we start to pay more? The answer is yes. So starting from my industry, if I have the right numbers, I have digitalized, we are allowed to consolidate, rationalize branches, you're left with fewer staff. Obviously, you're able to actually pay more in that particular case. You get lots of, businesses coming in. You continue to support the IT industry. They continue to earn in dollars. There'll be lots more income. So we need to see how we must not compromise in paying the right amount to the professionals and those who are actually contributing to the economy, and not trying to just spread it around. You have other dole programs and other ways of actually supporting, rather than putting people on your payroll and by that marginalizing the entire productive workforce and the professional workforce, forcing them. And that's actually discrimination, because you're not paying for value, you're not paying for performance. And you need to start bringing this performance based pay. You need to put them on hypo programs. You need to put them on development programs, show them that there is a future for them, and get them moving up the ladder faster than, let's say, the peers who are performing lesser. I can go on, but the message I was trying to convey there is, like in many other things, I mean, brain drain is one aspect of it, is the need to develop the country, to get our act together, stop the corruption, stop the briberies, get everybody to pay tax, make this a fair system, bring in governance, transparency, digitalize all, payments, so that, everybody knows what's actually happening in the economy. Divest, become small, manage, handle what you can without trying to spread your tentacles too far and wide, and not being able to, deliver any value. Instead, less is more, deliver up, absolute value in the little bit that you do is what I would tell to all stakeholders who are interested in, very sincerely reviving this country, and then thereby, looking at maintaining our human resources within here and then enriching them while also developing the country, developing exports, developing services, and helping our financial performance by improving our balance sheet, balance of payments, and our ability to repay our debt, etc. I'm not sure, Niroshi, whether I answered your question.
Yes, you did. Since we are strapped for time, I have two more questions. One is from the audience that I'd like to direct to Professor Karunaratne, because this is along what he discussed about STEM education expansion. A member of the audience has asked, STEM education expansion has to be followed up with opening opportunities up for employment. Manufacturing industry has not expanded. A sense of entrepreneurship is lacking among graduates. Do you think the government has to provide concessions or incentives to create employment?
Now, I think we have to see these reforms over the long way. What is we can see that why the STEM education is weak, because as I told you earlier, primary education and secondary education, particularly when it comes to secondary education, lack of science teachers, lack of maths teachers, lack of English teachers. So this is why the large number of students come into the Faculty of Arts or the social science education in Sri Lanka. So the universities just postpone 4 years of searching jobs by putting them. But on the other hand, we need to rethink about the financial literacy education and entrepreneurship. So we have 22 million population and of course 8.5 million labor force. But even within the labor force, we know only 2.8% are called employers, those who say that they have given jobs to others. If we take by number of employers in the country is less than 300,000 in Sri Lanka still. Why? Because of the lack of financial literacy and entrepreneurial skills. So we, of course, can train entrepreneurial skills or those things in maybe accounting or faculties of management, business, all these faculties. But we cannot train that in social science faculties all the time because their curricula is different. And we are given only a limited time period to train their curricula. So that there is a big issue with respect to the existing number of graduates and universities, but universities are totally changing now. There are ICT departments in social science faculties. There are HRM courses in social science faculties. So there are a lot of changes happening. For example, some universities like University of Colombo, we don't have any issue with respect to graduate employment. If our medical faculty, if you take the law faculty or other faculties, they 100% employee within 3 months or 4 months. But even when they go abroad, there are enormous opportunities. But that is only cream of the cream. But as a country, we need to redesign the education from the elementary school to the high, I think up to the advanced level. Then only we can design the university. Universities we are changing, of course. So I think this is a long-term phenomenon, and this is happening. Why? Because the understanding of the people is different. Some are thinking the universities are still like the earlier period, entirely different. So the perceptions are different. So we need to change the attitude of the people also. That's why I wanted to pass this message to everyone. The higher education does not mean providing only degree. This is the strong message we have to give to the society. And rather than giving a degree, if they are professionally qualified people, they can work in professionals. So this professional education we have to expand. And again, I iterate that the technical education we have to expand. That's what I can say in short.
Thank you, Professor Karunaratne. Before we end, I'd like to direct a question at Dr. Bilesha. President Wickremesinghe has mentioned in multiple forums that when he highlighted the brain drain issue, that we should receive compensation from countries of the North who are eventually benefiting from this. What's your perspective on that?
I've written something on this in our upcoming SOE report also. Now, as we discussed earlier, now there is a heavy relocation package going on when somebody is taken over to another country. And then this giving back or paying back is normally becoming an individual's responsibility. It's ideal if we can pass it on to the employer who's hiring the worker rather than the worker having to do that payback, or there is some portioning, some sharing of it. But then it's hard for. So I think you lost me when I was saying that individuals cannot bargain this. So we need some international organizations to help them. And maybe if there is a conversation going on, urging employers and countries of destination to take more responsibility about paying back for the human capital investment made in the countries of origin, there can be some traction, but it might be hard for an individual to do it alone or a country to do it alone. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that answer, Dr. Bilesha. I'd like to thank all the panelists once more for that wonderful conversation and the insights they shared with us today. So for any concluding remarks and to close this panel discussion, I'd like to move to Kushan.
Yes, thank you very much, Hiroshi. I believe the discussion was very rich in content. We spent a bit of additional time also. Our viewers must have gained a lot from the discussion. And so thank you once again for steering this discussion in a very interesting way. Well, with that, we're able to conclude today's expert panel discussion. And on behalf of Center for Banking Studies, CBS, let me express our gratitude to Dr. Bilesha Weeraratne, Professor Sri Karunaratne, Mr. Jonathan Alles, Mr. Ashik Mali, for their invaluable contribution for this expert panel discussion. I'm sure all of you have been very busy schedules since this is almost a quarter end. So we highly appreciate your contribution. And thank you very much to all the viewers who joined us today via Zoom and Facebook, who made this event a success. And I'd like to apologize for the technical glitches we experienced, which were primarily due to the connectivity issues. And as Dr. Bilesha mentioned, today's weather conditions were not in our favor. So Center for Banking Studies will continue to organize more events of this nature to discuss timely topics in the future too. We'll meet again soon with another topic. Thank you very much and good evening to all of you.